And now Korea is not only, it's not even a developing country, it's almost a developed country. And I ask myself, even when I'm seated receiving this award, when I look around and I say, how can Africa, how can Kenya be like this? But I know all this has to do with the commitment. Therefore, if you allow me, I'm going to go through a few steps that I think, from my mind, may help us as we move forward. If we want any organization to be successful, if you want any organization to be successful or any country to be successful, most leaders, they always define and focuses on the mission. What is the mission? Mr. Chairman, you told us every group among all those three groups, what is their mission and what they're supposed to do. But also there is the data out there, it is telling us there's evidence that the mission fidelity and focus are the key to long-term effectiveness. Therefore, if you in this group, and the way you're divided in three groups, if you focus on the mission that you have laid and knowing this is what we want to do. If it is the youth, we want to make sure that we train them on an ethical, if it is the governance, if it is the business people, you're going to define what is the mission, what do they want, what we want us to achieve at the end of the day. I think that is some of the key things. However, one of the things that we make mistake is that we always say that the mission commitment without consistent correspondence values make mostly ugly, spiritually dissonant, repulsive, toxic leaders I know. Let me repeat that. Mission commitment without consistent correspondence values make most ugly, spiritually dissonant, repulsive, toxic leaders I know. That means, by this I mean that every mission has to have values. Without value, it is easy for everyone to be diverted to different things, especially when they reach out there because of the power, because of the money, and because you don't have value, it is easily to be distracted. If you ask yourself, there's so many governors that were appointed or were elected a few years ago in Kenya when they started the governors. And I know many of you, I don't know many of the governors, maybe one or two, but if you read the newspaper, you're going to hear all those things. But when they were being elected, when the election was going on, there was a vision, there was a mission, this is what we do. Then you ask yourself, what happened? How did we lose that? And the point I'm trying to bring to you today is that because we don't have the values. If you don't have value in the mission, even in any company, if the company is only directed by the vision and they don't have values matching together, at the end of the day, we'll lose focus. Or two or three people end up accumulate the wealth, and because they didn't have the value, then they lose the focus. And then the majority are just left out there hanging. And that's what happens even in politics. When we elect people, they give us good story and we find it is good. This is the person that can represent us. Then at the end of the day, you ask yourself, what really happened when they got there? Why did they divert to what we all had agreed? And I would say most of the time, it's because we don't have values. Therefore, in everything that this organization is going to do and any company that's going to do, and even your own self, whatever you're going to do, any vision you put, you have to also match that with the values. Understanding the values are very important, the same as the vision. Many of us, and I know this is very well known, in his famous speech, I Have a Dream, Dr. King uses a phrase that we recite all the time, and that is, that's I have a dream, but there's one phrase that we ignore or we don't notice, and that phrase is, but let justice roll on like a river. Let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never failing streams. That phrase was paraphrased from the book of Amos, chapter 5:24. And what King was saying is that justice is good, and that's what we are seeking. We are seeking justice. But if it is not followed with righteousness, it's all in vain, because this justice will be used and be corrupted. And that is exactly what Amos was talking about. If you read the book of Amos, especially chapter 5 and 6, it contains some of the most moving poetry in the Bible, strongly denouncing the religious hypocrisy, economic inequality. So it was not a surprise that Dr. King would reference the book of Amos in his major speech or main speech, I Have a Dream, which was done over in Washington, D.C. Throughout the text, Amos voices injustice of the day. The entire book is given to denouncing the excessive of 8th century BC. And for those who have become rich in expenses of the poor people. And that is exactly what, if you read the whole book of Amos, that is what they were focusing. And Dr. King at that time, he was going and dealing with the injustices that was going on in the country, the inequality that was going on, the corruption that was going on, the civil rights. And he quoted that not only in his speech, I Have a Dream, but in many of his speech, he quoted the book of Amos 5:24. And that is exactly what I would like us to think. What are we asking? Do we have values in what we are asking to do? Do we want to be guided by those values, or we just want to ask something to come? Because it is easy, even for people of faith like us, when we get to a point to be easily corrupted. We got to define the mission, and we also going to define the values. And we're going to go down there and find how we define those things. If mission defines what we do and who we are and what we are doing for, how do we, what we do, who should we be honored, and also who should this honor be to? Let me repeat that again. If mission defines what we do and for whom we do it, values define how we do it, what we do, and among ourselves, who should be honored and be emulated in this endeavor. So the values are always going to balance to know who should be given these honors. The mission guides us, but the vision also makes us to be what we are. Let me read another. I know most of you who have taught leadership or who have done leadership, and I do believe all of us are leaders. There's a gentleman that originated from Germany and resided in the United States. He's one of the best known gurus in leadership. He passed away a few years ago. His name is Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker says this: values eat strategy for breakfast. Values eat strategy for breakfast. To be clear, this is what he means. That does not mean that strategy are not important, but what he's saying is that it's not important. He says that you got to build values to be able to achieve what you are trying to do and to strategize what you're trying to do. Without values, which turns out to be a culture. What is our culture? What is the value of this culture? Every organization won't be successful. And therefore, I do believe that a country like Kenya need to build a culture that have values in them. Because without the values, everything that we do and everything that is done, it is going to be corrupted by what we do later on. What I say to you today as Christian or people of faith is this: you're more responsible than anyone to model biblical institutional values, and you're capable as anyone else to fail to live up to these values. The gap between professionalism and performance is more consequential in your case as a leader than any other subordinate. So for you now, God has he has set you up in this group because he has set you up to be the leaders who are going to continue changing the world. It's in every country, a movement is created by a very small group of people. And I'm glad to see that most of people in this group or members in this group are young people. I know most of you are seeing what you're seeing on TV right now in the United States and many other countries, especially in Europe, what the younger people are doing, something that have never been done before in this movement because of injustices. We have never seen what is happening in this country, and it is because of the young people. We know what happened in South Africa when Steve Biko and the rest of the younger people had a movement. And therefore, I want you to count yourself to know that God has chosen you at this time and this season, or he has set you up to start a movement. Don't think this is just a group, but a movement. And to understand that you in what you do, it is more important than sometimes what you think about it yourself. You've been invited in this position, not only by your friend, but God has ordained this moment and this opportunity to be a beacon of light, in what we're about to do. This is what I also want to remind you, that many leaders, I quoted Dr. King, I also quoted about Peter Drucker, what he talks about values. And that is what this morning I want to emphasize on. I know many of you know Bill Harbor. Bill Harbor was a senior pastor of Twin City Bible Church in Chicago. And this is what he also says in his book in 2000 called Axiom. Powerful leadership provides let me repeat that again. Powerful leadership insists leaders to have responsibility not only to embody, but also to enforce values. So when you are a leader and you're a powerful leader, you're not only supposed to lead, but also you're supposed to be responsible in enforcing the values, because that is what we always miss. In many meetings that I have had in DRC, And most of the time, even meeting the president before the new president, you end up looking at and asking yourself, okay, this is what they want to accomplish, but what are the values behind it? Who is going to hold who accountable on what we're doing? We've seen that many times when you become a leader, and because you don't have value, and everybody is afraid of what you do, and that happens a lot in Africa, it is much, much better that you guys are growing at this time. You can be critical of the president and you can be critical of anyone without any problem. There was a time when I was growing in Kenya. I've been out of country for more than 35 years, but when we were young people, I remember you could not even dare think. There was a time the Attorney General Charles Jonjo had said that you cannot even think or even dream that the president is sick or dead. That is treason. So things are changing. They're changing for good. But at the same time, we got to have value in what we do. A good example also comes from Paul. Paul always had that value of saying whatever he was doing, he held everyone else accountable. Think about when Paul was able to confronted Peter, because Peter was yielding to the pressure of the Jewish people that the Gentiles had to go through circumcision. And Peter denounced, and Paul denounced Peter or rebuked Peter. But we always see that point. Think about it for a moment. He was able to rebuke Peter. But what did Peter do? What did Peter do? What Peter did, even though in the church hierarchy at that time, he was more senior than Paul, he took it well. That shows leadership. You ask yourself how many people nowadays, even in organization, forget about politics, an organization can tolerate people to rebuke them when they know that ethically what they're doing is wrong. So for me, I'm just trying to say that how many people in your organization can talk to you when they see flaws in your life? That's the only way you can have values. We know so many churches in Kenya, and there's a senior pastor, there's a bishop. Just like a few months ago, there was something that was sent to Kenya in YouTube of a bishop really denouncing people in his church, and really he went off on the church. The point I'm trying to bring here, I'm not trying to talk of anyone, is that in every life that you live or any leadership, you have to have people who can talk to you when they see you're doing wrong. That's the only way we can succeed. If you don't have that, if the system don't have that, it is easily for you or for me to end up being in the wrong place. That's why Peter knew that. That's why Paul knew that. And they did that because they had to have somebody to talk to them. And not everybody can be talking to you. You have to have people that you respect, and they respect you. If you think the case of Moses had to have Jethro talk to him. And he had to talk to him and say, hey, what you're doing is wrong. You can't carry this whole group by yourself. You have to make sure that you have somebody else that is helping you to do this. Not everybody could have talked to Moses. Even his brother could not have talked to him. Even Miriam, his sister, could not have talked to him. But he had Jethro who had talked to him. So my question to you and to the people Who is your Jethro? Who can talk to you when you're doing wrong? Because the mission is there, the vision is there, but how do you end up understanding that in the dark of the night, somebody can come to you and tell you what you're doing is wrong? How do you put values in the organization you're leading that they're going to balance the vision so that at the end of the day, nobody fails? I'm surprised very much to what has happened in Korea. In Korea, in those 60 years, what they have done was that they didn't mind whether you're president. They didn't mind whether you are the CEO of Samsung. If you end up doing something wrong that is going to hurt the economy, that becomes treason. If you steal, if you accept bribery, this is a law, and it becomes treason. Because stealing from an organization such as Samsung, or being corrupt with the Samsung, what that means is that you're destroying millions of other people by taking what is supposed to be theirs. And therefore, they have put those laws, they're tough laws. If you read them, you would think, man, these guys are not, there's no humanity here. But because of that, because of those values they have put within their companies, and everybody abides with that, we can see what Korea has done. 3 years ago, came a lady who, and I had the privilege to meet with her, who ended up becoming president. And within 2 years, the values that were guiding her, because she had her friends who ended up being corrupted, she ended up going to jail. And therefore, the next person that comes in, they're going to be very careful to make sure that they don't end up that way. I had a privilege about 4 years ago, also speaking in Dr. Yangi Chu's church in 7 o'clock service. And in that service early in the morning, there were about 13,000 people. And it was the largest at that time in the world. And 2 years ago, Dr. Yangichu and his son, they were arrested for investing the church money in the wrong way. But because of the service of Dr. Yangichu, his sentence was commuted, but his son went to jail for 3 years. I'm talking of values. Yes, it is the church money, but there's a value that is within that organization, and everyone agrees with those values. So I'm just saying that even in Kenya, even in Africa, especially this young generation, we don't have people to mentor them. And what they see is what they're seeing, we're being guided without values. I'm given a position, and next time I'm driving the most expensive cars and building homes and so forth. That's what they're going to do. And the country will continue going through the cycle. And it's so sad to see that. In his letter to Colossians, Paul commands them to admonish one another. In Colossians 3:16, he says, you got to rebuke one another when you see the other person is doing wrong, because we're in this all together. And if we're not this together, then we need to hold each other accountable in what God has put us here. We're in this together in Kenya. Whether you're appointed as a counselor, whether you're appointed as a CEO, you need to know that I have to have values for me to be able to lead these people or lead this organization. When I was speaking, Sanganga, when we were speaking in Desta, one of the people that spoke there really surprised me to hear that to join the Kenya Army, you got to pay almost $3,000. So you look at that and you say, man, this is so sad that rather than hire the people that can protect the country, we're bringing in people who have the money. So what about those who don't have the money? What is going to happen? I know this is a hot topic, and we can talk for the whole day, and we'll never finish, because it's something that is very much dear in my heart. And 1 hour is not enough, but it's enough. I know it's 6 in Kenya, and you all need to eat ugali. So in my closing remarks, I want to say, people join the mission, but they leave the boss. People join the mission, but they leave the boss. That's why many people join a movement, but they end up leaving and forming another one, because people have failed the mission because there were no values. So I thank you again for inviting me and to be in this opportunity. May God bless you, and we'll have another time. So I'm ready for questions.
Thank you very much for speaking to us. Wow, that's great. So many points to learn about vision and mission and values, the things that you have spoken to us about. Personally, I'm really challenged as a young person in Kenya to be a leader who upholds the vision, and also to be deliberate in terms of having objectives, having a clear vision and mission. So I will invite questions. Anyone? It's your chance to ask a question. There is somebody who asked at the beginning whether there will be such a chance. So it is your time now.
I have my hand in the air.
Okay, sorry, I'm still learning to use Zoom.
We are learning how to do it.
Please ask your question, Ambassador.
Now, thank you, Benson, for that wonderful presentation. You have had a lot of experience, Benson, over the years, and you have seen states like DRC, Congo. You have had the opportunity to visit the Koreas, South Korea, and you have a lot of experience. Being a Kenyan, you know what eats us up is that we, as a people, wish to see ethical behavior practice across the board in governance, in judiciary, within the farming community. What, in your opinion, would be the practical steps that people would take to ensure or to catapult us into that regime of respect for the law and ethical behavior? Because eventually at the end of the day, we feel frustrated, we feel withdrawn, because you feel that you have no contribution whatsoever, and those in positions, particularly of political leadership, call the shots, and the bulk of them, of course, will not be ethical. But since they have the resources, since they have the network, then they end up getting support from those others, the majority, who also lack ethics. So we run a nation. We know for sure that is not ethical. The practices are immoral, and yet, of course, there's nothing we can do. Again, is there any practical strategies that people like us will take? Because you realize as we travel across Africa, what we see here is practiced everywhere else in Africa, and very, very unfortunately so. Benson.
Thank you very much for that question. And you know, and I know very well that, as I said earlier at the beginning, that Africa now it's the youngest continent now with 60% of the total population being under 25 years old. And if the youth or the young people can vote the people that they know and they can hold accountable, that's how it starts changing. And I know this is not an easy thing, but for example, I'll put you out. I can think of Sudan. I can think of Sudan. How did the Sudanese, how are the Sudanese able to remove a dictator who had been there for many years, even being tried by the wild organization to be arrested, to be taken to Hague? But when the young people said it's enough, I think it is not an easy thing, as I'm saying, but I know it can be done by the young people holding these leaders accountable. And also want to say at the same time, it's how we start changing even from our homes, even when we start changing with the little steps. I'm surprised every time I come to Kenya and we're driving from Nairobi to Nakuru, that the driver always carries some money, even you know that your car is nothing, there's nothing wrong with that. The police is expecting you to give them something. And the driver is expecting to give the police something. I know it's not a simple thing, but I think when the younger generation start now working on that, things can change. That's what I think it can be done. And I do believe these things need to be taught all the way from home, to say how it is important and how that need to change.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Karanja. My name is Wanjiku. I'm sure you can't see me on the screen.
I saw
that's
you.
Deliberate. Oh, you did?
I did.
Oh, okay. So, okay, fine. So I'm Wanjiko, and my question is, and thank you so much for your presentation, for your discussion. I think it was very timely, particularly the issue of death row. I think that's very nice. I had not looked at it from that point of view, so I think that's very good, and thank you for that message. So my question is this: we normally are told that the youth are the future, the present and the future leaders of any country, say Kenya. But then when you look at the scenarios that we have in society, you see that there's a disconnect between the youth and the elders, or the youth and the older generation. In many regards, it could be economics, politics, education, etc. I'm not quite sure, and I'm still not convinced that we are all singing the same tune, because we have been singing. When I remember when I was a youth, we used to be told the same thing, that we are the future generation, the future leaders. But when you look back, and even as we see the situation now, we're still singing the same tune we were singing a number of years ago, be it 50, 70, 80 years ago. So I'm still not convinced that we are all in the same boat with regards to the same message and moving forward in the same direction of proper leadership and good governance. With that in mind, what can we look forward to? What can the youth do besides what you've told us? What can the youth do, and how can the older generation meet at the point of meeting in the middle, so that we are moving the same direction? Because we're not singing the same tune. So how do we move forward together, bearing in mind what you've said, bearing in mind the values, the principles that we're trying to adhere to, etc. And the challenges, of course, of leadership and governance in many African countries, including Kenya. How do we get to that level? How do we get to that point?
Thank you so much, Wanjiku. I think I confused you with somebody else. I had not seen your picture. I saw somebody else. I thought it was you. But to answer your question, I just want to say that there's no simple solution for how that can happen. But I know when the youth gets together, they can do anything. They can decide for change. For example, here in the United States, the police brutality has been going on for years, have been going on for years and years and years. And just 2 weeks ago, when George was murdered, the young people, white, yellow, African American, Asian, they all have said it's enough. And they didn't care whether they have to walk all the way to White House. We've never seen White House being barricaded with military and so on and so forth. But it gets to a point whereby the youth says, we have had enough of this, and we can't continue like that. It's not something that is going to take, it's not something that will take one time. But I'm just saying in 2020, there'll be change, there'll be election that will come. How do the youth hold the person that they're going to vote for accountable? And this is where I think is very important, is when the youth collectively believe that when they work together, it's worthy the expense of losing one's value. Sometimes when you believe this is my mission, but sometimes you forget that mission to work collectively to be able to achieve what as a group people want. This has to be taught this has to be taught all the way from home. People have to talk at home. People have to talk from school. People have to talk in different avenues, but there's no shortage of that. The second thing I think is very important is when you empower the youth economically, when they start running things, because it'll come to a time when, whether we like it or we don't, where these 60% who are already the majority are going to hold positions where that make decisions. Otherwise, you're not going to have 80-year-old, 90-year-old people making decisions. So I think this is something that need to be talked. This something need to be talked even in the church. The pastors need to understand that majority of the people in the church are youth, and you got to respect them. But they also need to demand that kind of respect.
Okay, fine. I think that's great. Fine.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I can read a comment from the chat. Thank you, Dr. Karanja, who is going to hold who accountable. Very profound. Accountability, especially in the church, is much needed. Maybe you can say something about that, accountability in the church.
Accountability in the church is very important, because as a pastor or as a bishop, in that one, every successful ministry, you have to have people who will talk to you brutally, in a brutal way, into your life. People who are going to talk to you when they see there's something wrong with what you're doing. But think about how many ministries have failed. Either it is here in the United States or it's in Kenya. You ask yourself, what happened to this bishop who used to be great, who really had the word and was bringing people to the ministry and doing great things? What happened that he ended up reaching to the point whereby he's so ignorant of the church, or tenets of the church, of the ministry? And what happens is that he ends up growing, accumulating wealth, accumulating power, but nobody tells him, hey, this is wrong. What you said last Sunday was wrong. That's what I talked about Peter being rebuked by Paul. When Peter's trying to say, because he was yielding to the pressure from the Jewish brothers, and he said, you Gentiles, to become Christians, you have to go through circumcision. Then Paul rebuked him. But Peter, because he had allowed that as a great leader, he was able to take it okay and accepted that rebuke. And that is exactly what needs to happen in the church. I have seen some of the amazing, amazing ministries, even here in the United States. I deal with the ministry, I deal with the mega ministries throughout my journey here in the United States and throughout the world. But I have seen whereby bishops or senior pastors go rogue. Nobody can ask them any question. Nobody can talk to their life. And I want to tell you, brothers and sisters, if you don't have somebody who can talk to you or to your life, you're in a danger zone. Because it's not if you fail or if you get tempted, it is when it will happen. Because all of us go through those challenges. The devil is going to come in one way or the other. But if you don't have somebody who can talk to your life or who you have allowed them to talk to your life, you're going to fall and fall miserably.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Karanja, for that. I'm going to allow one more question. Then we go towards the end of the meeting.
Okay.
It can be a question, it can be a comment. Anything. Moses.
Yes, thank you, Bwana Francis. Now, mine is an observation and a question after that about tribalism in Kenya that seems to wipe out all values in even Christians. That you are first of all your tribe, whether be it a Luo or Kuyu, before you are Christian. And I think that is one of the things that ails us as a country, that you are first of all your tribe, then a Christian. That is why we have our man syndrome, our tribe is being persecuted. How can we liberate ourselves from the tribe? If you have maybe put some thought in the politics of tribalism in Kenya, how can we as Christians liberate ourselves from a tribe? Thank you.
That's, for me, that is, that's very simple. If you study the Bible, there was nobody who was more Jewish than Paul. Paul responds and says, even through when he was talking to Peter and others about the meat, and he said, I'm of the tribe of Benjamin, I'm a Pharisee, I've done these and these and these and these. But at the end of the day, all those, I count them nothing now. I count them nothing. Of late, I'm out of the country, so the many things I hear are hearsay. And I was talking to one of my relatives who feels, she feels she's a woman of faith. And she was pointing and she's saying one of the vernacular radio station or TV station, I don't know. He said it's doing a disservice to the community than it was supposed to be, where you believe that we got to appoint elders, we're going to teach our people where they come from. All those are good. Those are important to know who you are and where you come from. But at the end of the day, those things you ask yourself, how valuable are they going to be within what you want to achieve? You're not going to be a Gikuyu forever. You're not going to be, when you come to United States, you're going to be a Luo, you're not going to be this. You're going to be a Christian whenever you go, and that's your mark. But it's so sad that many people get their interest and their attentions from the media and social media and those people who have great voice. And one of the sayings is that when politicians know that they're being observed, they come out with a suggestion: we're being finished. We're being finished. And so you ask yourself, like, are we being finished or you being finished? When you are stealing all these things, we were not together. When you stole all these things, you never shared anything with me. But now you want to say we, it is you. And if you're finished, it's up to you. This is a story I would have told you, which was very important to me many years ago when I was a boy. And I'm going to paraphrase it in just 20 seconds. When my father one time was very ill and he went to hospital for a month, and I was expelled from school because I didn't have a building fund. My mother went to the headmaster of the school because he was my friend of my mother or my father, and asked him if she could borrow 20 shillings so that I can pay the building fund. The man who was a Kikuyu responded and said, well, how are you going to pay me? Your husband may die soon. And on the way, my mother was going home and she was crying, and she met a supervisor of a farm that was close to us. He was a Kipsigis. And she asked her, why are you crying? And she said, I need money to send my kid back to school. And the Kalenjin said, come home and ask my wife to give you not only 20 shillings, but I'll give you 40. And don't worry, until Mzee is out, you pay me. So who is my neighbor among the two? The headmaster or the supervisor of the Kalenjin? So it's those things that sometimes we don't value them, and they're very shallow in those things, but people know how to use them very well.
Wow, thank you. It seems you are ready to answer every type of question because you're giving very good responses. I want to ask the very last question. Actually, I'm going to read it from the charts. Somebody says, our forefathers always had a 30 years window of passing on the baton. How can this be implemented in this generation with the youth being over 60? Actually, youth in Kenya are almost 80%.
Can you repeat the last part of your question again?
Okay. Our forefathers had a 30 years window of passing on the baton. How can this be implemented in this generation with the youth being over 60%?
Well, I can answer that question in a very different way. That I think one of the things that Africa has to, it can be implemented, but one of the things that I think Africa has to change is the mentality that the government can create jobs. It has to. But what government does, and I have seen becoming successful, is to allow the platform for other investors to be able to create jobs. Because I'm a very strong believer that at 30, if somebody is going to retire at 50 or 60, they're still very productive in your prime time at that time. But because the window, as you're saying, of 30 years, the window is too shallow and there are no jobs, because it's only one job that is available, and I'm 60 years old and I'm holding that job, and I have a younger person who is 30 years old. What I need to do is to be kicked out or to retire so that this person can get the job. But I think the money that is being spent in Africa, it can create so many other jobs that you don't have to do that. The natural resources of a country such as Congo is more than the total budget of USA, Britain, and France and China combined together. Think about how much that money is. But where does that money go? Whom does it benefit? You go, the roads are not made, there's no running water, there's no, there are no good hospital, they're not good schools. All those, if you invest all that money back and allow the investors also to do that and hold them accountable, not the way the China are doing now, is you got to understand, and I'm sorry to see this because I'm been out of the country for some time, but you're going to demand to say, okay, China, we asked you to make this road, but this is what we want you to do. Don't bring everybody here, even the drivers and everybody who is doing this, but we want you to be the engineers and others, but these ones we got to make sure that that money remains here. So I do believe the 30 years window is there. The generation said that, but things have changed because people are living longer than they did. So a new strategy has to be found as to what that needs to be done.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to thank you, Dr. Karanja, for giving us your time. When I reached out to you, I was not sure whether I would get you, but thank you for availing yourself. And thank you for hinting that you would be available another time, because I see us inviting you a few more times or many more times. So I just want to thank everyone who has joined us today. I have shared on the chat section our WhatsApp group. You could join us and learn more about us. If you would like to support our work, I have also shared a pay bill number there. I want to invite Dr. Tim Kerohe to conclude this meeting for us. Tim is the Vice Chancellor of International Leadership University, which is a Christian university in Kenya. And he is also the founding director of LNet Kenya. So Dr. Tim, please conclude for us.
Can I finish by saying thank you also for this opportunity. I want you to know that there are so many people who are rooting to fight corruption in Kenya. I was in the United Nations the other day, and I met some people who are doing that, and also in Korea, the country of Korea is trying to do that. Also, when I was there last year, I met with Magaria, who we all know very well. And we met, and he told me that they're joining together to fight this war. I want you to know that you're not by yourself, and I appreciate being this part. That's when my assistant asked me about this. Normally at this age, and I would be in Tokyo because we do have our PhD student in Tokyo, and I normally visit them in May. So because of the virus, I was not able to. And the last thing I want to say that count yourself blessed because of that 60% of the younger people. Africa is still not being hit so hard by this virus as many other old countries or aged continent. So God always has Africa at his hand, and he's going to continue protecting that nation. You guys are strong. You guys have everything, and your genes are strong and powerful to fight this virus. Thank you, and thank you all of you for giving this opportunity to visit your homes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karanja, and also Nanga Kariuki for the opportunity to share. Just in closing, to say just one thing, and then I'll be happy to close. I think maybe, and thank you for the challenge of leading with values. I think for all of us, if Kenya is going to change, it's because each one of us will begin to do something small. Fortunately, by the grace of God, LNet has a history of having contributed in a small way. I've seen one in the audience here is one who was the secretary of the team that actually put together the values for Kenya for Vision 2030. We were a very small group. We didn't have money or necessarily a lot of power and so on. But by beginning small, doing something little by little, we were able to influence what is now Kenya's architecture. The other day, I was in a meeting, now that I'm in the education sector, for vice chancellors. And when we're talking about the new curriculum, the CBC curriculum, the vision of that curriculum is to raise young people who will be ethical and who will be proactive in terms of their engagement in terms of society. And I thought, how good that we were able to put in those values a long time ago, now maybe 10 years or so, to be able to be a guiding factor. You never knew, of course, many years later, God would use that. So each one of us, I believe, can do something where we are. Of course, it helps to band together. That's why a group like the governance group that Telnet is putting together is helpful, so that together we can, of course, energize and be able to do more than what we could do alone. So my encouragement to us is to sign up for the governance group. We'll begin to clarify what we can do. The referendum bill is coming. And the politicians, of course, have their interest. What can we speak to, regarding the referendum, and how can it tailor to the needs of Kenyans? Because yes, maybe there may be things that need to change, but for the interest of the common person. And again, it's just by banding together, by beginning to do what we can do, and putting those things, especially in the context of the statutes, because those things will outlive even us, if it's within maybe the architecture of the governance of our nation. But thank you so much, Dr. Karanja, again, for the encouragement to live with values, to live out our values, and to continue to in a sense, to stay put, to keep persistent. I think our time is well spent. Allow me to request, one of us, I don't know whether Brother Muleji is still there. He could kindly close for us with a word of prayer. Munaweza, if you could kindly close for us, if you can unmute. Are you there? Yes, okay, you can kindly do that. It doesn't seem to be happening.
The
You
new norm.
might be the one to do it.
Okay, let me do it.
Okay.
All right, Lord Jesus, we thank you so much for the challenge tonight. That by working together, by serving you together, each one of us doing our little bit, we can bring change. When we think of those inspirational figures like Martin Luther and others that were mentioned to us, it's because they put their trust in you. Help us to be a people who put our faith in you. And to start the small things, whether it's right where we live in our neighborhoods, to put leaders and and accountability, to be able to play our role in terms of contributing to good governance, to values, to the right people getting into positions of influence, even fronting ourselves sometimes when it is you are bidding to do that, so that even though it's going to be difficult, to be able to stay out there and serve you and make a difference. We pray for blessing for our speaker as he does his work in Beulah Heights, but also around the world. And thank you for the opportunity he had to, even through technology, be able to be a blessing to us so far away, back here at home. Thank you for his example of many years and of working with you, and even just how you lifted him up to a place of influence and responsibility there. Bless him and the work that he's doing. Pray for each one of us that you'd continue to stir our hearts as to something you might want us to begin to do, no matter how small it might look today, that you'd help us to multiply that. You will be challenged tonight to have movements of change, that whatever activities we begin now will become a movement with your blessing and the work of your Spirit to be able to bring lasting change. We know there is hope for this nation. If only all of us will begin to do what we can with what we have, where we are. We thank you. We bless you.
Amen. Thank you, everyone.
Amen.
Thank you.